Yeah, no, the thing about like casting people and curating it is definitely, I feel like I got a good bit of that too from like my beautiful dark twisted fantasy. I think there's a big element there of like you got like all the lights where he's just like, oh, what if we put Elton John and Fergie on like the bridge? You know what I mean? Like just like zany combinations, but like seeing something for somebody like talent wise that they just might not have normally like been suggested to do. You know, like I think that's really fun.
Sacrifices. I'm passing up on elbow room to show them what the hell I'm on. Out to steal the night show. I used to be scared of the.
You're watching Loud Music Only. I'm your host, AT Bianco, and today I am pumped to speak with an artist who's from Hampden, Maine. He is such a creative person. He can rap his ass off, he can carry a tune, and he's coming off the release of his new album, Night School. His name is JR Specs. How are you, man? Thanks for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. What's up, AT? I'm stoked to be here. I'm feeling good. Day 2 of the album era. So yeah, it's all good things.
Yeah, now it's fresh off the release of Night School. I'm sure there's just a bunch of emotions that you're feeling as far as the release. You had a release party over the weekend. Some people showed out. Talk about like the fresh feelings that you're having as soon as you listen to, Night School for the first time on streaming.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's a very interesting kind of phenomenon for me because like, you know, you put your heart and soul into it for a year and a half. When you finally get there, like obviously like the record comes out, you listen to it for the first time on Spotify, it just makes it sound different. You know, it just hits extra when you get to that point, like listening to it on the public app with everybody else. So that's awesome. The release party was great. Had some really great people in the room that showed out, and made it a special experience for me, which I appreciated. It also though, like I was telling some of my friends today at the office, like you ever like have a friend that like runs a marathon and afterwards they're just like, oh man, I feel terrible because it's like this giant thing and it's such a rush, and then when it's over it's like a little bit of a trough.
Right.
I'm definitely today I'm starting to like be like, you know what I mean, like it happened, and it's awesome. Like I'm so stoked, like people are just getting acclimated to the record. It's just like for me like a little exhausted after the last couple of days, you know.
So, based off of what you just said, would you say that you're more in love with the journey of creation than like the after fact of it?
It depends, right? So like it depends. I think like when the record came out and we had the album release party and everybody's like, yo, like they're finding out what I knew all along, like what the song sounded like, and how much of a big step up it was from my old shit. Like that feels incredible, you know? It's really just like when you get that rush of blood to the head and like all these great things happening, like there's always just a little bit of a sine wave, balance you out. I'll feel great tomorrow or the next day or whatever, you know? And that's actually the cool part about it too, is that like that's happening because of the release of the record, which, like you're saying, is about, life puts you back at square one. Like life gives you more work when you accomplish the thing, So it's kind of like a poetic justice thing for it to land like that.
You have your two friends, Deuce and Buggy, behind you.
Yep. Yep.
We'll
Do
get
some
into
buggy.
we'll get into talking. I want to meet them, by the way, and
Of course. Yeah.
we'll get into talking about the overall world that you created around the album. But first, what I love to do, I love to learn about the lore of an artist that I talk to, the origin story. So if you can give me the JR Specs lore, to anyone who's watching that may not know who you are, tell us about your upbringing, maybe way before you started making music, and what kind of things did you love doing as a kid?
Those are great questions. Okay. So I mean, going before music, like you have to go back really far because I started recording music when I was like 12.
Wow.
And that's been my stock answers because that was the first time I did a rap demo when I was 12. But then earlier this year, I kind of got nardwired a little bit because my mom sent me, she had a cassette tape of a mixtape that I made when I was like 4.
Oh
And
my gosh.
but it wasn't hip hop. It was like I was coming up with little like nonsensical jingles, but I was talking through it like it was like a sequenced album though, which I had so some crazy shit.
So your mom nardwired you?
Yeah, she literally was like, "Yo, like I check it out." It was like a video of the cassette playing, and I was like, "Oh my!" I was thinking actually about using it if when I find a project that like ties in well enough and this is the thing, right? Like I had this other record, 99 Daydream, that was about my upbringing and kind of like putting those childhood memories to rest. Cause I had a great childhood. Like I really did. Like I'm from Maine. Like we didn't, me and my friends, we didn't grow up in danger. Like we were bored some of the time, but like we made our own fun. Um, so I had an awesome childhood, and that record was kind of about like putting it to bed and not just looking in the rear view. So I wish that I had the recordings from when I was 4 when I was doing a record like that. Nowadays I'm more so like looking to the future, so it's harder to work it in to the new songs, but I'm gonna find a way to sample my mixtape from 2003. We'll see.
Oh yeah, that's a what do you call it? It's like a time capsule
Yeah,
almost, you know what I mean? Now do you remember like what you recorded something like that on? Was it like a toy that you had, or were
I
you
think
at
it was like a in like a movie from like the 2000s or the 90s, you'll see like a professor with like a voice recorder and a cassette. It was like my parents had one of those, just like an audio cassette recorder, and I was just there's no backing tracks. I'm singing a cappella straight into the thing.
What up? Like the first time, let us hang out. I want you to take my while we turn it down.
Let's get into talking about Night School. I want to hear about like the rollout with Deuce and Buggy, the creative vision behind it, what Night School means to you. I see that you stemmed a lot of creative inspiration from Sesame Street.
Yep.
Kind of making your own adult version of that and touching on these important lessons that you've learned throughout your time of making music and in your young adult life. So let's get to talking about the meeting of Night School and what Deuce and Buggy represent for you.
Start with the title. It's called Night School because I would say, like, the same way I'm kind of telling you, like, I had a very easy, comfortable childhood, and when I got to college, I had to realize, like, oh, like, now that I'm at the wheel, I don't know if I really know what I'm doing. Like, I'm not all that content with this shit. Night School is kind of the concept of like, you can just like sit around and do what you're supposed to do, go to work, go home, watch TV, whatever, or you can go to night school, which is like when the bare minimum's done, like go that extra mile to fight for your happiness, because you're not just going to be happy by default all the time like you might have been when everything was handed to you when you were a kid, and some of us have to learn that, some of us maybe understand that off the rip. But so night school to me was about committing to doing the work to find a fulfilling life and build that. The way that the puppets fit in was kind of it's a two-pronged thing. Like, number one is that I have a brother with developmental disabilities who never really like graduated from watching like kids movies and shows. So he's 31, just turned 31, I believe. And he is still watching Sesame Street to this day. So it's been on in my house for like my whole life. So that's something that's close to my heart, just in terms of like the aesthetic. But because like the whole point of Sesame Street is it's like kind of this cute, friendly aesthetic applied to like learning experiences and showing kids how to navigate life with like learning letters and numbers and vocab and stuff like that. This to me, I was like, okay, let me make these puppets that are like essentially two very drastically opposite reflections of myself. And let me use them as vehicles to try to explain like how I'm learning to navigate life, but not in elementary school, like in my 20s, and that's why the songs are about life moving too fast and jealousy and putting in the work and learning what it means to commit to building a fulfilling life from the ground up.
One thing that I noticed throughout this process of you rolling out this album is the hands-on work that you put in. I'm almost positive I saw a video of you stitching together those puppets.
My mom was helping me. I don't so much, but my mom and I were kind of like working through it together,
which I think is such a great thing to have with a parent, that relationship.
Yeah.
Working on something creative and your parent helping you, or a friend or whatnot. Talk about the work that maybe you had to put in, the night school you had to put in to create Deuce and Buggy. And let's chat about like storyboarding those skits. How long did it take for you to write those? Talk about like creating their world.
Yeah. So as far as the world building and the scripting, um, I'm gonna do my best to. So it's a culmination of like a lot of nights that I was just like pacing and thinking. So sometimes it's hard to quite remember the order of events of how it came about. But um, the very first like record that I have of like the seed of this idea is back in 2021. I had tweeted, and you can find this tweet; it's still up. I tweeted, um, I got a bunch of projects that I still got to make. And then in parentheses, I wrote the names of 2 albums that I hadn't made yet. One of them was Prism Theory, which I can talk about if you want. It's kind of a separate thing.
I'm interested.
That one's a cool one, I think. And then the next one was Jim Henson Wormhole Movie. And the concept of Jim Henson Wormhole Movie, I had not figured out like what I wanted it to be meaning wise with like the educational undertones of like making it a puppet show. But I just knew I thought it would be sick to like make essentially what was like a spin-off or parody of Sesame Street where I was watching the TV and then got like sucked into the TV on some like magic shit and fell into a show. And then that the album was actually going to be more like closely adhering to the format of a puppet show where like I would have them like the things that you see in the animated scenes where they're talking to me was going to be part of the album. I ended up moving away from that just because I thought it was going to be too hard to just enjoy it as a record, you know, and maybe a little too on the nose. But that was the original idea. From there, I finally when it started to gel with like, oh, the things I'm writing about is like learning how to be in your 20s and how to fulfill yourself. And when I realized like learning is very much like a, you know, it just made me think of Sesame Street. So I realized I dug up the idea and applied it to kind of the learning themes I was already writing about. And I was super stoked to get the chance to dig this zany idea up and create a different incarnation of it. I wanted to make fictional skits. And then the very first episode that I made is just the one where it says, it was my 25th birthday. And it said, today I turned 25, but I have a gift for you. Night School, an experiment by J.R. Speck starts now. And then it's like a choppy animation of me like falling out of the sky and tumbling through the air. That's the only reason I went with stop motion is because I couldn't figure out how to make that falling thing. And I had to do it stop motion because all I had, it was like pictures and I cut them out. But then I was like, oh, this actually looks really cool. And just by coincidence, I was like, let me make the next one choppy, you know, and that became the whole aesthetic for the story of the record. And as far as the scripts, I really made that shit up as I went along. I really did, especially for the first 2 seasons. Like the first season, I really would post a video and not know what was going to happen in the next one. I thought I was Vince Gilligan doing Breaking Bad or something. I don't know. It was not. It was not a time effective strategy. So like by the last season that I did, I wrote them all and then made them all. You know what I mean?
Sometimes we put a lot of stress on ourselves to, oh, I'm going to plan this idea out and it's going to be well thought out and it's going to be, you know, what you always envisioned as, but creativity is always floating in the air and it doesn't always come when we want it to. Sometimes it just, you know, taps you on the shoulder and it's like, surprise, bitch. You know what I mean? Something like that. So I'm happy to hear that you got that idea and you harnessed it and you developed it, even if you felt that maybe it was last minute. Because I'll tell you what, from the viewer's perspective, it did not seem last minute at all. It seemed very well thought out, very well written. And I think it's one of the most creative ways I've seen an artist set themselves apart when rolling out an album, creating new music. And it's interesting too, hearing you say like, oh, I wanted your cutout picture to actually fall maybe a little smoothly when it comes to animation, but maybe you had to settle for the stop motion. And sometimes like running with that is okay. Like I've been there with certain creative ideas or certain things. Like it's okay if you don't have the means for an idea right now. Like maybe it's down the line, you'll have the means for the animation you intended for. But I think the style is so cool. It does give it like your own almost Sesame Street world you built off of. And so as far as the stop motion goes, Every expression, every scene, every movement from Deuce and Buggy, and maybe you're thinking like this or whatever, you had yourself take a picture of each of those movements. And then I saw, you had some featured people. I saw like Malik was on there too,
Mm-hmm.
as well. So talk about maybe the collection of assets that you had to have,
Oh my
because I
God.
know that that's a lot of work.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite like you would see with claymation where it's like 1-to-1, every frame was a manually snapped picture. The way that I did it was first of all, the puppets, like I would need to take a bunch of pictures of them the first time they appeared, but then I was kind of rotating through like 5 or 10 possible frames for each of them. It's not like I reshot the puppets for every scene. I had to shoot new assets of myself for every scene, because my face does a lot more things than theirs do,
Right.
believe it or not. So what I would do is set it up on the ring light like tripod, and I would take a video of myself acting out the scene, and I'd screenshot the frames that I needed, so that I wouldn't have to spend like an hour doing like timed photos and being like, does that look okay? Um, and that's pretty much like how it came about. And I'm so glad that like I had that almost like accident that drove me to do like the choppy style of animation, because it took it from like being a Sesame Street parody to then almost having like a weird splash of like Blues Clues to it artistically. You know what I mean? That's what it reminds me of in terms of the surface level aesthetic on the
Paw Paw
final
Paw.
version. Exactly, bro. Yes.
Blue's
Um,
Clues, man, that was a staple
yeah,
in my household. I didn't
yeah.
even think of that, maybe subconsciously, but yeah,
Just
I
the way
could.
that they're like little like cutouts, and there's a human interacting with these like more two-dimensional like creature elements, like it started to remind me of that, which is awesome because even though it's not exactly what I originally intended, where it's like a direct knockoff of Sesame Street, it has the same effect where like Blue's Clues is also an educational like program, you know what I mean? So it's
Right.
evoking all the same things.
So speaking of ideas, let's get into the nitty gritty of some of these songs.
Definitely,
Um,
yeah.
so the first 30 seconds of the first track, Night School, it reminds me of maybe some of the Beatles' later abstract music.
Yeah, I've
Something
gotten this one. Yeah.
something as similar as like A Day in the Life. Lots of moments of um, crazy musical transitions. Maybe it makes you feel something like musical frisson, like you get the hair stand up and you
Yeah.
feel something. I noticed that on that first track, and it transitions into a song which is kind of totally different to how it started.
Mhm.
Um, and your lyrics, like I tried to tell you, I cannot be bothered to try. Right. That's kind
Yeah.
of where it transitions into what sounds like a totally different song. So talk about like producing this buildup on the first song and how you wanted to showcase maybe your different styles on this. Talk about um you know how that one came to life, and maybe how you decided, okay, this is the intro track.
Yeah. So that was originally, as you could probably guess, it started as two separate songs that ended up getting stitched together. The first one was originally called um it was called Benny's Bulldogs, I think. And it was a much slower, because you hear how my voice is sped up. It was a much slower, like kind of soul crooning thing that I did with my homie Jimmy and Whale Machine. Um, and it had that section that's there where it's like, I focus on the cracks in the floorboards more than the roof over my head. I need a new perspective before my ride arrives for the night. Um, which is just to say, like, kind of what I was telling you about comparing your journey to somebody else's and getting where, focusing on what's wrong, not counting your blessings. It's just saying, like, I need to figure that shit out for myself. I tried to tell you I cannot be bothered to try, but you just won't die. So what I was trying to convey with that was like kind of the same way I'm pulling these personalities out of me and kind of like acting as if there's different things interacting inside your head. I felt that like, um, if you're like feeling a little depressed or a little down or a little off, like not wanting to go to the gym, go about your normal life, like go do the things and do that extra work to make yourself happy. It's almost like I was trying to like personify that as if there was like a villain that's like, man, I'm trying to kill this kid, but he won't stop fighting. You know what I
Mm,
mean? So that's what it
yeah.
was. Is like, yo, like this shit's hard, but like I'm gonna find a way to feel better. You know what I mean?
On the second song, Good Conversations, featuring Malik Elijah. Love
Yep.
that one.
The one and only.
The one and only. Talk about how that song came to life. And was there a particular moment in your life that inspired that song, or a time in your life? What does it mean to you? It's a very self-reflective track.
Yeah. Man, that's a good question. I think a specific time, I don't know. I remember being kind of like holed up in my last apartment. I live in Williamsburg in Brooklyn now, but I used to live in Bushwick. And I had a really small room, and all my recording equipment was shoved up in the corner, and it wasn't good feng shui for me making music. And I was in that place really of like being too hard on myself and maybe expecting too much. Um, Working really long hours. It was my first year on an office job. I was an entry level. I was up late a lot, and somehow still expecting of myself to make a lot of music. And I remember, just being like just so deeply exhausted. And that's why the lyric is it opens with good conversations, inside out how you found me, underneath comforters aging too fast. So it just was like this really almost like desperate, like sorry for yourself. Um, oh my God, like my hair's turning gray in here. I'm not doing anything of note that's important. But the good thing about the song is that for all of the things that it talks about that are like sad or lonely, it juxtaposes it with a good conversation, which can do if you just talk to the right person, and even if it's not like some shit we're doing right now where we're really chopping it up, even if it's just somebody's like um just making a joke that makes you really laugh, like you have to keep in mind how much that can turn things around, something little like that.
Mm.
So that was a big part of what it was for me, is kind of juxtaposing like how bad things can be with how good they could be like soon, you know.
I like that. And I maybe sometimes don't take song titles so literally,
Mm-hmm.
but this one I will, based off of what you just said, and you're
Yeah.
entirely right. Sometimes we're not in the mood to talk or get to
Yeah.
know a stranger or whatever, but it to our surprise, say we have a break from work and we go to the bodega for some food, and you're talking to some random person, like to our surprise, that kind of makes our day a little better.
Yeah.
Maybe changes our perspective a little bit. I'm very big on that. I'm very big on talking to that random person or whatnot, at a public function. It's, maybe not always the most comfortable thing to
It's
do, but
hard. It's hard.
it's difficult. It's very difficult to kind of take that wall down. Now on Malik's verse, he talked about himself on that a little bit too as
Yeah.
well. Um, I kind of listened to it in a way of like you guys were maybe like talking to each other,
Mm.
like in the sense of a conversation. Um, were you guys in the studio for the creation of that? Talk about,
Yeah.
maybe some of the creative direction you guys gave each other when making.
Yeah, so the way it came about, Malik and I already had one song, "Welcome to My Zone." So we were already cool for a good minute when we were working on this good conversation record. Like we had done shows together by that point. Like great dude. Um, but I remember I heard "Bad Fruit" by Gene Dawson and Earl Sweatshirt, and I thought it was so cool the way that like um, and this is a strange comparison, I guess, but that is to me like the same as casting like Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems. It's just like not what you expect him to be doing,
Oh,
you know?
100%. A
And so
100%.
for this record, I was like, how can I like cast people interestingly? So I had this record and I was like, oh, who do I know that's like real, like a dope rapper on their traditional shit that I think will take a step into a more like vulnerable crooning direction. And once again, like the fucking Wizard of Oz, I knew Jimmy had been to school with Malik, and Jimmy had told me like, yo, get Malik to sing on something sometime. Like he's got a crazy like croon, like a dope voice.
Yeah.
Um, So it all just aligned. I was like, it would be awesome for Malik to step on this thing and do something real different. I think it would shock the people that are hip to him for his more like lyrical rap shit.
Right. No,
And he just
100%.
crushed it, man. I
Oh,
love what he did with that record.
he you guys complimented each other so well on that one, which is the reason why I asked that question, because it's um I always like to learn, I guess, the how something came about. And at the end of the day, I'm a fan. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's just very, very cool to see you guys collab. I was talking to an artist I was interviewing last week, and I was telling him how cool I think it is to be a fan of music and to see like one artist that you really like collab with another artist that you really like,
Yeah.
and you didn't even know that they knew each other.
Yeah.
I
And
just
see what they make too. Cause it's sometimes, it's sometimes like I'm trying to think of a good example, but it'll be like you'll love these two dudes. You're like, oh, if they just did a record, it'd be so sick. But you don't realize that, like, and I think this is so much more easy to understand for me now that I've been in so many sessions. Like, it's really interesting to see like two dudes that their music matches perfectly. If they get in the studio and they don't vibe, like the song's just not going to be good. Just like maybe one of them just talks a lot more than the other. One of them's really quiet and the other one's overthinking it. You know what I mean?
right.
So I'm also blessed to answer the original question. Malik and I did do like I did my parts for the beginning of that record, brought it to the studio. Malik did his verse live. Um, and then I ended up adding my second verse later. But like, it's dope to just work with dudes that you can click with in the studio too, because them being dope is not the only prerequisite, you know?
And another collab, which if I'm not mistaken, this is the first single that you dropped to the album Chain Link.
Yep.
Showcases your ability to sing, man.
Thank
Holy
you.
shit. You have some chords too. You got some pipes. You could reach all the different higher registers and stuff like that. Talk about that track you collab with Kinrose on that. Tell me about him. I'm very fascinated with him as well, and I'm a fan of his music.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk about how that came to life, maybe what that track means to you, and how that song maybe made you a little more comfortable to showcase your singing ability.
Yeah, sure. I think so. I knew of Kinrose because when I first got to New York, like one of the only kind of like platforms that I was aware of to go like meet more artists and shit was Annabelle and her that good shit.
Right.
I guess platform. And she would
Which
do
we hear her on the intro track too as
we
well.
do.
It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
we
She's a
do it.
great one. She's a great
It's
one.
so fucking cool for her to do that. She was like the perfect voice for it, like tone wise. Like it's
Oh,
awesome.
100%.
So shout out to Annabelle. And shout out to Annabelle as well, because when she was back, like, she's gone ballistic now. She's on stage with Tizo at every fucking tour stop, which is bonkers. But
Oh yeah.
a couple of years ago, she was doing like smaller shows at this place. I think it's called Short Stories. So I went to one of her short stories when I was real fresh to New York, and she had an artist named Kinrose there that I had never heard of. And Kinrose said, "Oh yeah, this is my first ever show that I've ever done." And there was probably like 30 people there. I want to say maybe I'm lowballing him and it was like 40, but it's a small place. So I just, I dapped him up. I was like, dude, that was sick. It really genuinely was great for your first ever performance. His pen is like super unique where it doesn't do too much. Like it's not being mad extra, but there's like a really cool like I'm trying to think. It's like he like if I was to compare it to handwriting, it's not like he's doing this John Hancock illustrious bullshit. He just has really nice handwriting. You know what I mean? Like he gets the lyrics down and it's very like cool shapes, and like he words things a little differently than you might expect without trying to do the most. It's like it's awesome. So I always loved his style since seeing that show at Short Stories. And then Malik brought me up last year when they did the rated PG tour together at SOBs. He brought me up to do Welcome to My Zone, and Kinrose saw me rap. And when I got off stage, he was like, literally, like right when I got off stage, he was like, "Bro, we got to do something." So I sent him Chain Link, and again, the whole like casting people interestingly thing. Like I had mostly heard Kinrose on stuff like Profile, where it's kind of like a chill sort of trap type like drum situation, but like vibes and just kind of like you know uh, uh a really relaxed bounce. But I was like, yo, this is a similar tempo to some of those pockets, but it almost leans more like alt pop. And I was like, I bet if he'll do it, I bet he'll fit it like a glove. So I actually sent him that and Sunlight, and he picked that one. And like lo and behold, I fucking love that verse, dude. It's so good.
It's so, you have a lot of great features on this. That one in particular stood out to me as well, and I like to hear how you have an emphasis on curation
Mhm.
and curating these songs in a particular order that sounds good to you, but also curating and almost casting these features like they're parts, like you were saying.
Mhm.
I find that very interesting. And now, were you guys able to get in the studio together? How'd that like come out creatively? Maybe tell me also who produced that.
That one was me.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I did. I want to say if you count the first song as two different tracks, whatever, I think there's like 8 tracks and I produced like 5 of them or something like that.
Wow.
But yeah, no, Kinrose, I did not have the privilege of being in the studio with him when he wrote and recorded that one. He lives down in Atlanta. So it was
Okay.
really like when he was up in New York was our opportunity to like he saw me rock on stage and was down with it. And so I used that opportunity to send him the songs and he recorded on his own time. And he crushed it. So I'm thankful that that even worked out.
Yeah, that's a great
Um,
feature.
yeah, no, the thing about like casting people and curating it is definitely, I feel like I got a good bit of that too from like my beautiful dark twisted fantasy. I think there's a big element there of like you got like all the lights where he's just like, oh, what if we put Elton John and Fergie on like the bridge? You know what I mean? Like just like zany combinations, but like seeing something for somebody like talent wise that they just might not have normally like been suggested to do. You know, like I think that's really fun.
I didn't learn that until like recently, like
Yeah.
a year or two, maybe. Just because that's one of my favorite albums, and I love reliving the first listen of an album that
Mhm.
I really love. And you hear voices on that are like, wait, is this person?
I didn't know it was Fergie for a long time.
No, I had no
Yeah.
clue. I had no clue. And just the mix and master of that entire record in general, there's a lot of layers that I feel like you could learn about, like layers
Yeah.
to the song as far as vocals sitting back, maybe hiding a little
Hmm.
bit.
Yeah.
Um, your music isn't one dimensional, which I love. Like it's not, it's music that you can't really sometimes even put a genre to. Like it's very unique. You have a lot of different styles in there. And this kind of transitions into my next talking point with melodrama.
Hmm.
Melodrama is this upbeat, beautiful instrumentation arranged on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, Kind of a little bit of like a maybe No Worries meets Thundercat
Yep.
meets Mac Miller,
Yep.
something like that.
You got a good
And
ear because I literally, bro, the way that song started was I had Lightweight by Anderson Paak off of Malibu, and I literally tried to make like a carbon copy of the drums. That was
oh
how that
my
all started.
god,
And it ended up sounding a little bit different. Then the rest of the song was different, but the drums was like, I was intentionally, it's like, how do I get that feel? It has this weird bounce. But yeah,
I
great
felt
call.
thank you. I felt that though. Like I think I'm big on like our musical subconscious reminding us like what we've heard before and how it's
Yeah.
influenced music that's being newly made
Mhm.
today. And I would really love to hear melodrama kind of like in this like club vibe almost. I
Mm.
would love to hear that while I'm out, I really
Yeah, that's
enjoyed
sick.
that one. um a lyric that stood out to me, um and on this song in particular, and I'll say it, and then um, if you have your own set of lyrics from that song that stand out to you, feel free to share it too as well.
Sure, sure.
The lyric where you say, "I've been signing off just to keep memory straight," my memory straight or memory
Yeah.
straight. Is that like a correlation with signing off technology? What does that line mean to you, and what are some of the themes of melodrama?
Yeah. So I think I've been signing off just to get my memory straight or keep my memory straight, whatever it is. It's definitely like that's one of those lines like I felt like I meant one thing when I wrote it. and then it kind of felt like it meant something else later. You know what I mean? Which I'm very open to now as an artist.
Right.
Like to me, that means like somebody else is writing. You know what I mean? Like which is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and it's dope to just be like that concept of like the ideas aren't necessarily yours. You're kind of just like pulling them down. But that line to me, I think what I originally intended was the song is about it uses the example of a girl you've just met as kind of like an anecdote about your imagination running away with itself and you losing your perspective. So that first lyric to me, I've been signing off just to get my memory straight, is like, I'm maybe like taking a step back a little bit and like making an effort to not get caught up with somebody or something that's like not good for me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And but the it starts out like that, like it's almost like if you were, it's not about an ex or anything, but let's say like you had broken up with a girl or she broke up with you and you're just going over for closure. It'd be like you telling your friend, like, I'm not doing that again. Like, I'm signing off. I'm keeping my memory straight. I'm remembering how this goes. I've been around this block before.
Gotcha. That's a good analogy.
So it's like that. And then it goes, how does it go? It's I've been signing off just to keep my memory straight. I think I forgot it all again. So it's like things keep happening. And then it goes, every lesson that I learned turned to ashes in an urn. Runaway imagination makes it challenging to curb. Which is just like you can get caught up in the heat of the moment and make the same mistake again,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as I often have. And, you know, like I was saying, it just uses this concept of like the situation with a girl as like exhibit A. But as the song goes on, it starts to talk more about like maybe you could do the same thing with your career, or maybe you could do the same thing with like I got a show tomorrow night, like I thinking about how it could or couldn't go. You know what I mean? Like it's really about just overthinking and getting ahead of yourself in general.
A transition to arguably my favorite song, uh, Key Lime.
Yeah.
Uh, it has a very nostalgic feel to it. I'll tell you what it reminded me of because of some of the lyrics. So it reminds me of my grandmother and grandfather that I grew up
Wow.
with, because my grandmother was the best like cooker, like cook and baker and whatever. And she used to make a key lime pie.
Yep.
And it was like a staple, like, oh shit, Sito's making a key lime pie, let's go, you know.
Yep.
And it was a rarity, you know. It was a great occasion when you get a key lime pie. So I listened to some of the lyrics and I couldn't really maybe understand if you were saying something about granny or grandpa or something like that, but I heard those and it reminded me of that. And you're talking about love and why you can't, you know, bring someone with you or bring something with you necessarily. And when Garrett sent over the project, I was driving home from Queens and I heard that song came on and it was like it struck a note with me.
Oh, I love that.
And it made me feel, I guess, like almost that similar comfort that you get after like having a conversation with your grandmother, grandfather. um and yeah, I just wanted to share that because that was like the initial feeling that
Yeah.
I got. So talk about what that song means to you and the theme of Key Lime.
Yeah. No, totally. First of all, I just want to say that's beautiful that that's what you got from the record, because it's almost exactly what it's about.
Wow.
It is very much about the first half of the record. I got the call that my granny had been diagnosed with bone cancer, and I wrote it pretty much immediately. You can hear me crying in the take, and I like left it in like when I'm like, it's the exact same thing you're talking about. Like Granny was like the heavy hitter in the kitchen in our family, and like that food element was something that always like brought us together. Like she would go out of her way to make some shit just so we had like a reason to sit around a table. So that first half of the record, where I'm talking about, can I have my biscuits, gravy, chicken fried, love on you like white on rice, gotta have it all the time. It's just talking about like it's putting the togetherness into that like analogy of just like the meal and being like maybe wishing you would appreciated somebody's cooking more, like they're cooking, but really just them, you know, and shown it. And I think that essentially what happened with that was I wrote that first half of the song and that very like emotional, like strange, surreal night that I had staying up till 4 a.m., like making that beat and writing that song. And then I put it away for about 3 years, 2 years,
Wow.
until like last August. I've maybe like tried to continue it, but I just didn't have the right thing. And then like a random Tuesday night last August, it just like hit me, and I came back and did that second verse with the why can't you leave it behind to be found and examined? What it means to be alive with your love and good standing. Um, and that's one of those verses where I really felt like it wrote itself. Like it feels perfect, but I'm not sure I could exactly explain every line. But essentially, what it came down to for me was that the first half was about realizing somebody you love is going to die, and the second half was about flipping that into a positive perspective of, well, we're all going to die, so why don't I live like today's my last day, you know? And you using something that's brutal and hard to get through as like a motivation to live a better life, you know? Of
Wow. Well, I'm sorry, for your loss
course.
and going through that. It's there's a lot of emotion when there any sort of death in the family or whatever. A lot of emotion to, I guess, collect, almost like there's a feeling of, I don't know, like that regret. Like you were there at all those meals and you were there for those conversations and you were there for that family time. But it's almost like maybe you wish you could show your appreciation like you know how to do now rather than like way back then as a kid.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like for me, I'm big on um like I was able to get to know my grandmother. My grandmother passed almost 2 summers ago now. So it's still, those feelings are still very fresh. And
Yeah.
her husband, my grandfather, passed when I was 15, so 10 years ago, almost going on 11. And I didn't get to know my grandfather as the adult I am now, but I
Yeah.
got to know my grandmother as the adult I am now in a sense.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of like, oh man, like I wish I could just talk to Poppy right now, like as an
Yeah.
adult, you
Yeah.
know. So I, that song to me, that was the one song that stood out to me on that album because it just, everything from the instrumentation and the arrangement on that to the lyrics, it made me feel something. So
Love that.
thank you, uh, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. And as far as like the instrumentation and the arrangement on that song, I hear, was there like a kind of like a dirty sounding guitar on that?
Yeah.
Talk about the arrangement of that entire song because there's a lot happening, but in like a really good way.
Yeah, that's the only song that I did completely by myself, like production, writing, mix, everything. It was a little too personal to kind of get anybody else involved. So you hear like there's trombones at the beginning that are really quiet in the mix. Like I played those. The song is built around a sample that I got from Splice that you hear at the beginning. That's kind of got the guitar strumming, and when you hear the distorted guitars coming later, it's just a chopped up and like pitch ramped version of the same sample. So it's all just like manipulated. On my end. But yeah, that was a strange night that I made that. Because I got the call. I like was up in an upstairs bedroom in this empty like camp up at the lake, where my family stays in the summer. Like I was the only one there. I was just shoved up in the top room with the mic set up, and I wrote and recorded that. I don't know. It's just it's one of those ones that kind of just made itself, and it you're right. There's definitely a lot going on, but I feel like it just kind of came together so easily. And I wanted to mention too, like that bit that you were saying about like wishing you could go back and spend more time with somebody or in a different phase of your life. There's a bit about that too in the second verse that since I know I'm rapping pretty fast on the song, if you didn't catch it, it's the lyric is I cannot regret the things that I didn't when I had you right next to me in my crib. I couldn't pay you back in 1,000 years. So I get to trekking it forward with no fear. So I just want to make sure like anybody that listens to that song and it reminds them of them their grandparents or somebody that's passed for them, like I think it's really important to realize that like even though you might regret like not saying I love you one more time or not taking them to dinner sometime that you said no, like you can take that and apply it to your relationships going forward and make sure to cherish people that are still here. But just remember like the things that some of these people in our lives do for us, like a parent or a grandparent, like it sometimes it's a debt you'll like never repay. So try like in terms of like that regret, like just use that as your fuel to go forward, you know?
We got the last song on Night School, Go to Mars.
Yeah.
Oh boy, is that shit
Yeah.
nuts.
Thank you.
That
My
shit
goodness.
is nuts.
Oh.
You guys probably went to Mars recording that. You have a couple features on that. You have Suts and Dre Waves. That's how you pronounce their name.
Yep.
I've listened to a little bit of Dre Waves. I want to get into listening to Suts too. They have very like particular styles that I really enjoy. Talk about Go to Mars. Did you write it? Did you guys write your verses? Did you freestyle it? What was the studio vibe
Oh
like?
goodness. So
Lots
that
of
was
chemistry on that one.
I had worked with Waves before. I had done 100 Families, but he had emailed me his verse for that. I think Go to Mars might have been the first time I ever got in the studio with Waves. And I have massive respect for Waves as a writer. Like he's a very, very dope rapper. Another guy that I met through just being on the circuit, going to Annabelle's shows, and people coming through Brooklyn doing the same thing. Dre Waves, I was in the studio with him, and it was the same way I told you, like when Malik hit me up for the feature, I was like, I want to crush this so people know that I'm serious. Like I was like, I'm in the studio with Dre Waves, like I want to crush this so people know that I'm serious. So Soto pulled that beat up. Waves was really digging it, puts in this crazy verse. I was typing away in the corner, jumped in the booth, did my thing. Like probably my greatest, like I think Key Lime's second verse, probably my best verse overall that I've ever done. But in terms of like a rap, like spitting, just talking my shit, like Go to Mars is probably the peak of my whole everything I've ever done. Like it was really when it gets to the part I'm like, gut feeling don't even cover it. I got drums in my bloodstream. Never woke up from my number one dream. Every day it evolves and it just keeps going and going. Like, oh, I was bugging out. And then Suts was my roommate through college. He just happened to be next to me on the freshman dorm floor, the next room over. And we became great friends and still live together. He's in the other room right now.
That's so crazy.
And that was his first, bro. That hook that he does to end the album was the first shit that he like. It was the first time he'd ever been in a real studio.
Before we conclude this, we wrap this up. Maybe give a shout out to some of the people that you work with at your day job. I hear that they're very supportive of your music.
Yeah.
And you love to show them that. I remember Garrett was telling me that. Talk a little bit about where you work and what that's like sharing your art with your coworkers.
Yeah, no, totally. It's very unique, you know, because when I started at this company, Patience and Purpose, in 2021, I didn't really have any concept of what it was going to be like. I'd never worked a corporate job, not so much as an internship or anything. I went straight from delivering pizza to working there like a week later. And it took me a long time to get comfortable enough in like a professional, like office environment to even start to tell people willingly that I did music rather than them like find out, quote unquote. You know what I mean? And it's just been dope to like finally get to a spot where like now, like, it's something that I'll willingly offer up and I'll talk to my bosses about it. They're all very supportive and they understand that like this is what I do. You know what I mean? Like obviously it cannot and does not get in the way of my job, but like they understand that when work time is over, like that's what I'm doing, and that sometimes I'll be taking time off to go on like a tour or go do a show or something like that. everybody's super supportive of the record, and it's awesome. It's agency life, you know. It's a lot of creative people, so they're very understanding of a hobby, and they're very receptive to it. It's very cool.
I love that. And I hope that you're proud that you do both of those, because it's
Yeah,
not easy. I saw something on Malik's page is like, in order to do this job, you have to do this job as well. And I think
yeah,
that's so transparent. It's so important. And it's something that everybody in the music space has either dealt with or is currently dealing with. So the fact that you work that job and you attend night school as well is something else. So
thank you.
right then and there, I'll use that as a good transition, a little outro. This has been our interview, our entertaining conversation with the one and only JR Specs. JR, thank you so much for joining the show tonight, chopping it up about your art. It's been really interesting. And as a fan, I'm a huge fan of this album, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a great conversation, and I'm glad I was able to shed some light.
You're watching Loud Music Only. I'm your host, AT Bianco, and this has been our conversation with JR Specs.